So we have our last meeting and our last topic for this series on the urgency of change on the religious life. That's what I entitled it. And includes other subjects, right? You saw it anyway, of belief, related topics, right? You can see that all of them are pretty much along the similar lines of belief. Is there a God? Because our religion is usually like that. Morality, the seeker, organization, and the new human being. So those are the topics more that I associated. I put them together. They're scattered throughout the book, but they're all related to this notion. The association of Krishnamurti with religion, of course, is for some somewhat difficult because of the connotations of the word religion in our time, which are not very positive. It might have been at other times, but in our time it's somewhat complicated, being complicated by science. In the 19th century, science said, and the philosophers echoed that God was dead. So that was it. We're still living with that sort of thing. The notion that religion, theology in particular, was destroyed by science, that those speculations of the traditional religion were felt by science to be non-demonstrable and therefore essentially superstitious, and it was thrown out. But some people felt that was throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that indeed the traditional religion and its organization were no longer relevant to this scientific inquiry, this search for truth, in demonstrable truth, was no longer relevant. Belief was therefore not relevant. That science did not require any kind of belief. Where was belief to be found? In science. So belief was in trouble. The very notion of God was in trouble. And all the institutions, organizations built around them were also in trouble. Even morality was in trouble because of the sense that there was no ultimate authority to sanction such commandments, such injunctions as to how we should behave, that human behavior must also be subject to the same laws of nature that matter followed. If it did exist, it must be along the similar lines, and so on, right? And as for the new human being, there was no new human being because essentially we were all the result of evolution. So it's all determined. There was a certain quality of determinism. There might be a movement forward to something, but we could not really tell what that was. And there was, as a result, a certain return to materialism. Science became technology, and technology was put at the service of power because the will to power was perceived to be one of the major drives of the animal. And therefore, morality traditionally was subjected to these survival impetus impulses. Counter to that, the theosophers, as you know, they said this is going in a terrifying way. We better try and rescue what traditional religion, or what all the long history of religion has been pointing to, that without spirituality, without freedom from the factors of division and conflict, humanity may progress scientifically, but it would end up destroying itself. And they proved that prophecy of theirs proved itself amply in the two world wars, and on the other rest of the wars, that technology did not amount, scientific progress did not amount to moral progress, nor to human progress, nor to betterment of humanity overall. And therefore, you see, they said this is the Kali Yuga, is the age of disorder. And at this time like this, a new teacher arises We're going to look for the vehicle of truth in our time. And they found this boy, as you know the rest of the story. So there's a very interesting, historically, to put it in a little bit of context, where Krishnamurti comes out of. Well, we don't know where he comes out of, but the truth, where does he come out of? That's a real, very good question. It's a bit of a mystery. We'll end up in mystery anyway. But the sense that there was a historical juncture at which this phenomenon arose of the drive for scientific truth ended in materialism and war, and the attempt to rescue spirituality against that current, and leaning on the notion that there must be a voice of truth. And that voice of truth, as far as we're concerned, some of us are concerned, I hope we're not believers, but there it is. You see the sense of was a voice of truth, of intelligence, of goodness, a great teacher in our time. And the theosopher said, this is the boy, we're bringing him up, we're protecting him. And then he said, truth is a pathless land. So he destroyed all organizations, you see. So there is even a dialogue, a dialectic then within that whole thing, right? When he says truth is a pathless land, you cannot approach it by any means whatsoever, right? He sort of brought a new meaning of truth, a new meaning of religion in that sense. He never dropped the word religion. He always said, critiqued organized religion. That's a fundamental distinction, right? Organized religion as system of authority, dogma, belief, prescriptions of morality, right? And all that. See, that is the traditional thing. Having brought up as a Catholic, I know a little about it. So you are brought up as a Catholic, there's a tradition of Christianity, it's a particular branch of Christianity, and you have certain prescriptions, you have certain authority that you follow, you see. The questioning wasn't really allowed because it's all the word of God, and you just have to follow it. God could be contradictory, but you couldn't question it, you see. That was a bit odd. That the Protestants, they questioned it, but they went also off in their own peculiar ways, which for Catholics are completely bananas. And then there are the Orthodox, and so on and so forth. You see, everybody's split. Then there are the Jews, and there are the Arabs, the Muslims, there are the Buddhists, there are the Hindus, there are the Sikhs. There are any number of major religions and minor religions with their own particular sects. That's how we have split it all up. Kay invariably critiqued the structure, the meaning of organized religion. He wasn't talking about institution, wasn't talking about dogmatism, wasn't talking about laying down the law. Was talking about what then? Opening up, if you like, a window on truth. And that is not coming through belief, is not coming through authority. He, in fact, said one time, the spiritual journey, the first principle, the first foundation of the spiritual journey is no authority. So, and he said, including my own. So we had to turn it back on himself, right? Because then he becomes the authority. See, and in fact, most of us, when we started with Kay, we were so impressed that he became our authority, right? So now he said, question authority. He said one time he came to Brooklyn after having been in the United States, got onto his podium there and started talking to us about questioning. He said, I just been to California, and we were driving along the highway, along the road, and there was a bumper sticker on a car, and he said, question authority. So that's what we're going to do. So we were learning from the Californians, bumper stickers. He was learning from everything. So he said, we're going to do that. So that's what he always did. And therefore, he put himself out of the pictures and authority. He set up foundations, but they were not intended to be dogmatic organizations that were going to indoctrinate and impose any kind of thing, right? Any kind of dogmatic way of being and so on. So what is this that he's driving at? He doesn't drop the word religion. Why does he drop it? What was he use? Some people use spirituality, for example, in replacement of it, right? But he kept it. I suppose because, personally, I asked why. Because maybe there's no other real substitute for it. You cannot call it science. He couldn't call it philosophy either, though he sometimes accepted the word philosophy because of the how you call it, etymological meaning, the love of truth. Right? That's what it means. Philo, love, Sophia, wisdom. Actually, love of wisdom. He translated it as love of truth, actually, but it is love of wisdom. And he said we neither have love nor wisdom. We just have ideas. So he was very good and always emphasized the fact that we must distinguish between the notions that we borrow, inherit from any tradition, or that we ourselves come up with, from the actuality. That was his relentless, ruthless approach to all this. And therefore, all right, you can have a school. He had schools, but were those schools to indoctrinate us in his teachings? No, they were to awaken our own sensitivity, understanding, perceptiveness to what we were actually. Because at the heart of it is self-knowledge, not something that comes from outside, right? Not an imposition of a tradition. He critiques the tradition because it is a system of belief. Now, he says, why is belief necessary? Right? What is belief? At the core of the Catholic doctrine, the Catholic Mass, the Catholic ritual, the Catholic being, is the creed, what they call the creed. So they recite it in every Mass. We believe in God, the creator of the world, and we believe in Christ, the only Son of God. Well, like I used to say, we don't know how many children God had, but they say he was the only one. All right, okay, maybe at that time he only had one every time. And so on. See, the creed is where they put the focus. There's a lot of beauty, there's a lot of wisdom even scattered throughout the whole thing, but they try to condense it in this way, and that becomes the authority. You can't deviate from it, no matter how questionable what they put down there, because the authority emphasizes it, and you're not allowed to question it at all. They don't discuss it. So that's part of the problem. See, but for Kay, the way to truth, or the way of truth, implies questioning, implies doubt. You say you start with certainty and you end up with uncertainty. You start with doubt, you question, you find out, and then when you see the truth for yourself, then there is no doubt about it. Not a truth invented, not a truth borrowed, but something that is actually perceived to be so. That's what, for me, signified that Krishnamurti's way, approach to truth, is essentially mystical. I told this to my friends, and some friends say, already talking about that doesn't fit him. Well, mystic in the sense, see, the Catholics, whatever you can be said about them, is that in spite of their dogmatism, they allowed the monastic orders to persist. And out of the monastic orders came these mystics who said, hey, we've gone beyond the word to the perception of that which is. And therefore, here's what we say. Some of them ended up badly because the church didn't believe that they were speaking the truth. But yet, there was this respect towards the real explorers. Let's call them that, just out of, we don't know exactly, right? But the sense that they actually said, we are not contented with words. The word is not the thing. Can we find out whether God exists or does not exist? That's one of the headings for the chapters here. One of the chapters, no, does God exist? How would you find out? See, the assertion God exists or the assertion God does not exist, there's still assertions. There's no actual relevant thing, right? We can believe, but we don't know. And does the belief make any difference in real life? For some people, it did, right? I remember my grandparents, and my grandmother was a great believer. Right? She believed in God. She believed in Christ. And she said, they teach you to be good. And she was good. She learned to be good, or she was probably good herself. So she would always go give to the poor. There were lots of poor people, and they were poor themselves. And she would not allow anyone to go past her door, any beggar, without giving them something. And when she didn't have something to give them, she would borrow from the neighbor to give them. That's good old Catholic charity. But just the goodness of no, she said, nobody will pass by my door, no beggar, without getting something. And if I don't have it, I borrow. And so on. And they never quarreled with anybody about property. They made a point of no conflict, you see. So people can learn from whatever, right? The actual qualities can come through in spite of the bigotry, the prejudices, the delusions that every tradition brings with it. There's an arbitrariness to the past that invariably comes with it, but also something that reflects our own quality, intent to goodness can come through. And some people catch it. That's what I felt. My grandparents, my grandfather was also like this. He used to tease my grandmother because he said the church is just a theater with bells. Now, that didn't please the priest very much, but he was the best friend of the priest because the priest was a very liberal man. And my grandmother, of course, thought that was blasphemy. And he said, "You're going to go to hell, Antonio." And they would both laugh for saying such things. See, that there's the beauty of you face a tradition, but you're past the tradition because you don't accept the identity, but you perceive the meaning of what right action is. So there's something else, right? They were Catholics and they were not Catholics. They were not Catholics. They were just people who learned something. So you can have that too. Krishnamurti throws it out. The morality, he says, of society, which is the core of religion in a way, is morality. It's not even belief, right? You can believe whatever you want, you see. God, what is God? That's why he says, you see, we don't know what it is. The word is not a thing. You can make it into anything you want. That's part of the arbitrariness. What's the difference between Jehovah, God, and Allah? It's the difference people make. Ultimately, it has no meaning. Actually, the religions of the book is a problem in the world, you see. They've been at war with each other for a very long time because they lean on a book instead of the meaning of what that book may be pointing to, or those books regarding the meaning of our life as human beings beyond any label. The label kills us. So Krishnamurti is very clear. The word is not the thing. Hold on to that. Perceive it. See the fact that if you put a label on yourself, you are dividing yourself from someone else. You're bringing about conflict, and therefore you are not religious. Because religion, the religious life, that's what I call it religion, but he addressed the religious life, not religion. The religious life is concerned with the whole. Is actually the meaning of it is the ending of all conflict, of all division, of all prejudice, of all belonging, of all separateness. See? And that has lots of implications. Where does he start? The awareness of conflict, how we divide. If religion divides, therefore, it's not religion. Denies religion right out of the meaning of religion itself. Every meaning core of religion is a wholeness, which for him is the meaning of goodness. For him, he doesn't use the goodness very often. He uses wholeness. But it for me means the same. Right? The problem of the world, the source of evil, the ground of evil, the nature of evil, is fragmentation, conflict, and sorrow. So we have to tackle those. That's real morality. That's real religion, right? And that's what will bring about a different quality of society. That's what the theosophers were also concerned with. That's what any authentic religious movement might be concerned with, right? Or religious person, actually, not the movement. Which is, what we see is conflict, what we see is sorrow, what we see is violence, has been there from the beginning, and we continue to inherit those tendencies and to act in the same way. These people who call themselves Christians, Jews, or anything else, or Muslims, and are killing, are actually contradicting entirely the whole religious stream with which they identify. Right? I had remembered a little episode in the Bible, in the New Testament, in which Christ is talking in the temple, teaching. He was already allowed to preach, and the good old boy, young as he was. And they were always teasing him, the Pharisees, you see. And they were already plotting to get rid of him because he was undermining their structures. This is the story of religion itself. When the truth comes around, tradition, which is the past, feels threatened by truth, because truth is new, truth is living, and the past is dead. But the past is the source of power, is tradition. And tradition means bringing the past over into the present, and therefore destroying it. Right? So they want to keep their power, they want to keep their movement, and comes this boy, the son of the carpenter, and he starts talking differently and begins to undermine the structure of power, because love knows no power, and he's teaching love. He's teaching detachment. He's teaching the abandonment of vengefulness, of resentment, of what is it? Pride and the rest, of acquisitiveness. You didn't own anything. Why should you own? What do you own? What are you building for yourselves? Why are you destroying one another? He questioned the whole thing. So trying to destroy him, he knows it. And he says, your father was a murderer from the beginning. Not so my father. And what we see, even in those who claim his name as their ascendancy, is the same old murderous lineage of humanity. Religion is concerned with the ending of that lineage, with the ending of violence through and through. And the principle is, when Krishnamurti finds a principle, where there is division, there must be conflict. Violence is in division, and religion, as a source of division, denies its own meaning. So what is it then? How was the religious life? Was this wholeness, right? Was this, he said, there's freedom. There has to be freedom, because freedom is the meaning of love, see? Is where love comes from. But to be free means to perceive exactly the factors of delusion, self-deception, that separates us from truth, from ourselves, and divide us from each other. Basically ignorance, right? Humanity is darkened by ignorance. Can we wake up to what is false in us? Intelligence is to see the false as the false, the true as the true, and the true, he said, in the false, which is a strange statement, but can be understood at some level. Like, for example, my example to illustrate it is that we all need security. But the way we go about security implies the delusion of it. We seek security in division, in nationalism, in religious affiliation, in possessions, in class structure, and so on, ideologies. We seek security in division, and that's false. We need religion. We need security. That's the truth. So we see the truth in the false, or the false in the truth in the false. The false is the way we seek security, and the truth is that we still need it. See? So anyway, that's just trying to explain part of his statement as to what is intelligence. So religion, the religious way of life, let me not talk religion, not substantive, is a way of life. Therefore, is daily life, is in the movement of relationship where that change needs to happen. He ends up this series of chapters on a very revolutionary note. The new human being, what is the new human being? The new human being is this one, right? Who goes through the understanding of himself, herself, to the point of putting away the factors of fragmentation. Sees the truth and the false in that whole movement. For example, in the search for security, I bring that in as an example, right? Where you seek security. Right? He used to, in his statement, the core of the teachings, He starts by saying, you see, we build images of ourselves, because the core of the teaching is a very significant statement, because it's just one page. He tried in one page to put the essence of what he had to say. But of course, when you read it, it might be a bit baffling, because it's not too clear if you don't know the general context of the teachings as to how to understand it. Though some people, I'm sure, are sensitive enough or intelligent enough to understand it and go beyond it if they read it. So no question about it. But generally, you need a context. And he starts, this he wrote in 1980. And he starts by saying, going back to the statement he made in 1929, when he dissolved the Order of the Star in the East, of which he was. So he dissolved the organization of which he was the head. Organization is out, because he said truth is a pathless land. You can't approach it by any means whatsoever. So this is a peculiar religion, that if it is a religion, of a religious approach, not a religion, a religious approach, which is there is no method being proposed. Not even a morality, that some people have a problem with. You can see why we would have a problem with, because generally we want a set of rules, guides for what constitutes right conduct. Without it, the religious approach seems to be not so meaningful. But he says, actually, right action is not through prescription, but through perception. Right perception is right action, is how we perceive and from where we respond. The immediacy of perception becomes the immediacy of action. Time is the enemy of man. So it is the ending of time psychologically as constituting a separate entity that becomes the nucleus of this non-divisive movement of human action and relationship, of wholeness. The primary factor of division that he sees is thought. But not just thought. Thought is necessary in all kinds of aspects, right? Like scientific and so on. We need thought. We need knowledge. Humanity nowadays, with the numbers that we have, would not be sustainable with a high degree of technological achievement, of industrial organization, social organization, all of which is the product of thought. So thought has a major part to play in human existence and human order and so on. But thought also is responsible for war. That's how he would put it, right? Therefore, it's one of the major factors of destruction, that you can see that all that beautiful knowledge is now being put at the service of destroying one another for material things, because we're tribal, because we're separate, constitute separate tribal entities. We call it now nations, or even groups of nations. You can call it what you like, but it's still a separate movement which fragments, divides, enters into competition for resources and power, and that leads to violence. That's the product of thought also. Thought that does not understand the true meaning of security, because everybody talks about security as an explanation and justification for what they do. This violence is motivated by security, right? And they call intelligence the information they got to better achieve their goals, their fratricidal goals. All right. So there's all misnomers, there's all misunderstanding. There's an incapacity to get past that self-centered movement. This is the freedom that is required. The understanding, therefore, freedom doesn't come just like that. It comes through understanding. That understanding is intelligence. And that intelligence comes from awareness, from perception of what is. This is the basis that he puts forward. And therefore, there's no prescription needed. That's an interesting thing, right? Don't kill. It's a very good thing to say. Don't lie. Don't steal, right? What is it? Don't give false witness, right? And so on, right? They're good things to say. But then there are other things that are very more questionable, maybe, right? More tribal-oriented. But you have to perceive it. You are in a situation that puts you in a situation in which, are you going to kill or not kill? It will always be that which will determine action. The instant perception of the rightfulness or not of in the moment. Kay used the word virtue, which is what traditionally encompasses the whole of morality. He did not discard it, the notion of virtue, But what is virtue? Right action basically means, and right action comes from perception. But if the perception is biased, the perception is twisted by fear, for example. See, he puts a lot of emphasis on fear in these chapters as being at the root of belief and being at the root of all belonging and so on and so forth, right? In the human mind, fear plays a major part. And fear is what seeks security also, in ideas, in whatever it is, right? So fear has to be understood because it distorts perception. Right? If we are afraid, then we will be distorting perception. And if we are afraid, we will either run away, fight, or freeze. So this is what is driving us in the world, is very mechanical, animalistic behavior. Freedom from fear, the understanding of fear becomes very important. The understanding of what is, you will always bring it down to that. Truth and what is are one and the same. There is a little question there for me, because truth also transcends any object or any manifestation for him, right? Truth is the perception of what is from moment to moment. And that the truth is what liberates, its freedom. And the truth in contact with what is, without illusion, the perception of what is without illusion is truth. And that truth reveals what is as sacred. That's a major step he makes, right? And if you saw that chapter, it questioned him a lot. They say, well, what do you mean? Then fear is sacred. Then, no, wait a minute, don't go there yet. You be free from illusion, which means to be free from fear, right? But he says, even this fear is what is. If you look at it without division, that fear will go. Violence will go, and you will never kill. It's a very interesting, different approach. I'm not sure if I understand it deeply enough, but it's why he doesn't prescribe. Because he says there is a state of mind, which is a wholesome, non-fragmentary awareness of what is, which dictates the right action necessarily. He will not be deluded by anything, and he has no self-interest at heart. And therefore, he will not act in these violent, conflictive ways. Look where morality lies. Morality lies in this quality of response out of a mind that is free from illusion and self-interest. So that becomes the ground, the foundation of virtue. So morality is there, belief is out, this quality of mind that perceives what is without illusion, without fear, therefore, or without acquisitiveness, without desire, without possessiveness, without self-interest. The abandonment of self becomes the key to rightful behavior, to a world that is, because it's relationship, to a different quality of relationship, therefore transformation of society. But that is not only to act differently, as he puts it, but to be different. There's a difference in being brought about by this, and that's what above all matters. That wholesomeness, that freedom, that love and intelligence are the grounds of goodness. And goodness is the essence of the religious life. He puts that forward to us as something too fundamental. See, that's why he keeps the word religion. So, all right, this is what it means. It leads to that point of timeless observation of what is, of the freedom from self, which brings about right action in relationship, which transforms our interactions, transforms our own being, in fact, opens up to being instead of emphasizing becoming, puts time in its right place, in the clock, and takes it out of the psyche, and therefore frees humanity from its endemic suffering, conflict and suffering. Is that significant, true, at least, how you say, hopeful? No, he doesn't know the word hope. I'm not going to go there. He throws hope out of the window. Right? He used to make this joke about hope, because as you know, he was fairly well known. He was knowledgeable about literature and so on, and he knew about Dante's Inferno. It means the hell of Dante's Divine Comedy. And of course, Dante, well, the way he wrote it, he said that when he was going down into hell, was going to give a tour, was giving a tour of hell by the Roman poet Virgil. At the entrance to hell, it has the devils also have writing. So they, at the entrance to hell, he said, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." So hope was to be perceived as hell, right? As the hopelessness, as the essence of despair, right? That's what it means. Despair, actually, espoir is from the French, from the Latin. Espoir is to hope. Desespoir is the denial of hope, right? So despair is the denial of hope. So that was hell. But he said, no, hope is part of hell still. You have to remove it if you want to find true life because it involves time. And this is a timeless way of being. Take time out of the picture, and there will be no hell for you, nor for humanity. All righty.
Yeah, Javier, what are you doing? You're looking at something.
Getting something to
Oh,
drink.
good. I went upstairs. You need something to drink. I went
Yeah,
upstairs.
I'm
Okay,
afraid
that is
my
not good.
mouth got a bit dry.
Okay, good. Are you hearing me? Yes. Okay, good. Because the internet is not good, so that's why I decided to come up here. And I don't know if I didn't hear everything because it always went out and in. So I had to add your
Oh,
sentences to the end.
all right. This is the way we normally listen, so don't be worried. We always, we're listening to somebody and so our mind breaks it, and we then have to try to compose it, put it back together. So this is just normal.
Yeah. So yeah, I find it great what you put together there. I mean, not just this session, also all the other sessions, but especially in this session as well. You put those topics together, and it seems to always reflect that fragmentary. So he answered, people came with belief, with God, with I am a reformer, and he always came in and answered in a way of that fragmentary movement which we are living in, right? And we are not aware of that in our normal life. And I found that so interesting, actually. And then he kind of says, the most important thing is relationship between man and man. And that's kind of so totally opposed to our outward looking. So that means you have to start looking inward and you have to start looking between relationship. I thought this was I don't know, it was just something to discover new again and to see that. And there's so many different ways around it. And yeah, I thought it's just a comment that I like very much the way you put all these different topics into that one topic. Maybe
I was hoping I had an hour there to go over it, so it might have been a different presentation. But but I had worked on it a little before though, because there are lots. They're beautiful. If you put these chapters together, if you go over these chapters, there's something very beautiful connecting them, and there are even subtler, I think, connections that you could track. And so I suggest you do that. Okay, yeah. The revolution. See, he said there's only one revolution. See, he picked up on the revolutionary spirit of the 20th century. And he said there's the religious revolution. Nobody knew what that was. The communist revolution, right? Then the Catholics came along and did a little bit of moving the religion towards revolution, but they called it liberation theology. Basically, it's a combine in Latin America, in the Hispanic world, between communism and Catholicism, because basically Catholicism at heart, even though it tied itself with power and became another factor of oppression, at the core of it, there is the defense of the poor and undertrodden, and is not for oppression, right? That was one of the corruptions of the church. They became allied with power and they became themselves a political power. I mean, the history of the church is fabulous. They had armies at one time. I mean, what the what? So whatever, see, so there is that, and I think there's something very beautiful in K, talking about revolution psychologically, and that is the meaning of the religious life. You have to have that revolution. Be a revolutionary, inwardly. And indeed, the revolution, he says we're only concerned with radical change, with revolution, and that revolution happens between human beings. You see, it's inward, but it's also between. Is alive, is in the actual interaction with us. I find that also very, very inspiring because it's not a part, it's not just me looking at my own belly button, which I have to do, but there is the interaction, how we live together because of our life and the quality of life and the wholeness of life. And it's not ideological. It's in the action, it's in the now, it's in the present, it's in the observation. Makes it very immediate and alive. So no tradition. He said truth has no tradition. And the truth is what liberates, right? The truth shall make you free. Even the famous guy said that. Then, there it is, the truth for you to look at. Okay? The truth is where you are, if you know how to look.
So I have a question since this is.
No, Nora had raised her hand before.
Oh, sorry, I did not see. Go ahead.
Sorry, I had it.
This brings up for me the an essential question, which is, what does it mean to die psychologically inwardly to everything?
Yes, that's it.
I mean, this is beyond what.
Yes.
What does this really die to the self? Die, that's freedom from the known. And in his terms, it seems to be actually meeting death as well,
Yes.
in a real sense.
Yes.
It brings up this, also ties into me with the question of sorrow, suffering, and, losing what you love, like, as if in love, there's no sorrow, but I don't know, those are the essential questions for me, really.
Yes, it is all implied in this, really.
Yes.
Indeed. You see, at the end, he says that the man, you see, who's free from the burden of the past,
Yes.
from the action of will, is the new human being and the only psychological and social revolution. So he puts it there, death, this ending of the past. That's what death means, right? For him, it's always that. And he calls it meditation, and so on and so forth. We know the language. And we know the meaning of what he's putting forward. But what does that mean? Does that actually happen? Is that, like they say, only for the few, for the great teachers who are born selfless already, right?
Yeah, life is always in movement, and it brings you this, but it takes away too, completely,
Yes.
utterly.
Well, but yes,
It is. That's
go on.
Is that
on,
not
Nora,
suffering?
sorry.
How can that not be? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, this is it. I mean, we're in another dialogue this morning with a group of friends of mine here in Spain, and they were asking this question. What is suffering? Why do we suffer? What does it mean to die to the past or to our attachments? Krishnamurti says, death means ending of attachment. And if you end attachment, you end suffering. So death is the ending of suffering. Psychologically, he's not even talking about meeting death ultimately in its true fundamental meaning. I don't know. We know the words. We have hints, though, and maybe we can point to those, right? If we want to be genuine and factual among ourselves and not create illusions together, which is there is an ending to the past. Occasionally, one past dies. There's some kind of, you see, the self is made up of constructs of the past, patterns. This is what he points to. There is a number of patterns which then constitute the me. Generally, those patterns, because they're patterns, because they're rooted in the past, and therefore essentially conditioned, they respond in reflex manners which create conflict. One of the sources of conflict is these reflex patterns which constitute the self. Because they're reflex, they do not see. They see only what they recognize. So we have problems in relationship out of that very construct of the me rooted in the past, in these patterns which are blind to the actuality and respond only to what they recognize. So if we have that suffering, because of the conflict we create, we're sensitive at all. Some people seem to be just so brutish that they don't even suffer. Well, good for them. They're insensitive, right? Some people are just insensitive. But if one is sensitive, one suffers because of the conflict that comes about through this constant struggle of the past with the present. We know this much. That is one of the living challenges to the past as the operating system of our lives. Is the source of conflict, is the source of suffering. That perception, we have to hold on to it, because that is true, I think. I say I think because I don't want to be absolute about any statement. I think it would be foolish on my part and dogmatic. We said no dogma. We're finding out if that is correct. In my opinion, it is correct. It's the correct assessment concerning the nature of conflict and suffering. Then we have to pay that should ring every alarm in our system concerning this operation of the past. Of ourselves, we have to question ourselves profoundly in terms of that being the essence of our psychological being, because it is itself the source of suffering. It's pointless for me to seek happiness when I am the source of sorrow. It's a total challenge. I'm not sure we are fully embracing it. That's what I say to myself sometimes. I say, well, yo, boy, we're not quite fully up to the, embracing the full measure of the challenge that implies in terms of sorrow, because it involves you. The questioning of the very psychological structure. I know this much, I understand this much, actually, that my conflicts in relationship arise from those fixed structures of my personal identity, which react reflexively. My anger, my fear, my desire is all habitual. Self is habitual, and that's sorrow. So sometimes I want to take just one little step, but it's not much. So I'm not giving you an answer, really, just to point to the problem. See, as they say, half of the answer to our problems is to state the problem accurately. So I'm trying to just do that much, right, if it's helpful. But sometimes we do run into those problems and we stay with them. That is part of the difficulty. And Kate puts us there. No exit from this problem. There's no answer anywhere. The answer is in the problem, because the problem is you. Where are you going to look for an answer? Because the problem is the very psychological structure. So you have to hold on in there. You don't know. You have to suffer. Not that suffering is the way to wisdom, right? But you have to suffer in the sense you have to put up with the pain of that the problem itself causes. Hold on to the tail of the tiger, he told us once. I think that it wasn't him, the tiger. It was this the beast that lives in every one of us. You have to hold on to it, because that has the energy, which, if you don't separate itself from it, can precipitate an insight. A couple of times it happened to me, the past was fulminated by this staying with the problem. And insight is the only thing that's going to free us from this. And it puts an end to the past, because it's intelligence. And intelligence sees what is true and what is false. And when you see what is false, it disappears like it never existed. So it is possible. That's all I can say. He says it, though, he puts it much more absolutely. He puts it totally. Not just a particular problem that I may have, a particular pattern I have developed, but the pattern maker, the very self itself. To have an insight into that is to put an end to the past, operation of the past where it doesn't belong, and therefore the ending of suffering. Because suffering is not that I broke my leg. The suffering is the psyche, is the self creating its own conflicts and problems. That's where it belongs, the word suffering. And if the self ends, suffering ends. But that means the ending of the operation of the past. That's just a description. You have to live.
Yeah, I think I tend to blame life because I didn't create myself. Life has created this, whatever
in
we are in, and it seems at times to bring great suffering. I mean,
yes,
that's what it feels like, right? Like if you imagine the death of somebody, just immediate, or what, or
right.
in nature too. You see it in the animal world, and
so right. You see, there may be something. I wouldn't deny what you're saying, but and maybe Krishnamurti wouldn't either, in the sense of there is an actual biological element of attachment, for example, right? And you create a family, your child dies, even giraffes mourn.
Yeah.
I heard.
Yeah.
I was flipping through the television channels, the nature channels, and they were talking about a giraffe. How this giraffe was mourning the dead calf that has been killed by a lion.
Yeah.
So mourning may be part of it, because a part of you're biologically, how you say, symbiotically connected, and something goes of what is a pillar of our own existence as biological beings, and so on, even emotionally and so on. So there is maybe that also, not to be discarded. But then there is a mental construct. I think that's Krishnamurti always goes there, no? There is the thing and the image of the thing, and then my investment in the image of the thing, because that's what the thing means to me. And the me becomes more important than the thing. See, he no longer sees the thing. It's a kind of blindness that takes over our own psychological being and our approach to relationship. We're not attached to the other person. He says, even goes that far. What we're attached to is our image of them, because that's what they mean to us. And generally what they mean to us is actually not even realistic, because it's an escape from loneliness, from insecurity. He's much subtler in his diagnosis, but I think he would not deny the biological aspect of life. And hasn't life put us this way? So you should continue blaming life to see if it's true. Right? Keep blaming life. I mean, some people have done that, right? They said, and also just they use biology to explain all our suffering. They say, don't complain about suffering. It comes with life. Fear comes with life. Pain comes with life. Violence comes with life. The whole shebang of hierarchy, territoriality, and so on. We studied all of that. And we said, that's life. And therefore we are that. Right? That's the biological evolutionary notion. And society works like this. See, they are justifying a lot of what they're doing these days in this brutal political international scene in exactly the same principles. That real politic is power. And the ones who have it can do what they want because they are the law. So, hey, that's the law of the jungle. We called it that. That's life. Yeah, and it isn't, because what we factor out of it is the element of thought. Thought is what governs human life, and thought lives in abstractions. It creates its own domains, but lots of it based on biology, as you can see, is an extension of the biological principle, but it itself living in a realm of non-relationship with what is living in a realm of illusion. If he were to see the other, he would realize the other does not exist, because we are each other. There's one humanity, one earth, one consciousness. Doesn't see that. It fragments at every point. That's the delusional side of the story. Kay simply points out there's no division here. We make it because we based it on thought and seek security falsely in these ideas and separate entities. There's no such thing, except it is made by thought. So don't blame life. That's where it would come, right? So keep blaming life if you want. And there's a point to it, because you will break your leg and you will suffer, and you will have to have a hip operation. We're all trying to avoid it, but probably we'll all end up, with some kind of android elements to us. Whatever. See, there is also that. I mean, biologically, we won't be able to escape the decay of the body. though we can live intelligent nonetheless, you see, to live free from all these factors of conditioning that separate, condemn us to everlasting struggle with ourselves and with others. Kay goes at that and says that's where suffering really is. We can be free from it if we apply ourselves, if we pay attention, if we are concerned and ready, feel the pain also. We have to, you see, for that, I think we have to feel the pain. That's one thing I say to my friends, if you avoid pain, you won't find truth. Why? Because the pain is true. It's pointing to something that actually is painful. It's an encounter with that which contradicts our own ideas and images of ourselves. That will be felt as pain, but if you don't go through that pain, you won't discover the falseness of the image. You have to stay with it. You have to see through the pain. The pain is telling you something. Everything in our lives is telling us something. That's why he says, don't divide yourself. Don't separate yourself from anything. Don't choose pleasure over pain. The choice is a mistake. No choiceless approach to life. And there is no escape. That's part of the difficulty. No escape. Krishnamurti is ruthless. No escape. You are stuck. But there's a way out by staying with what is. What is his own freedom. The non-divisiveness is his own freedom. But we have to discover it, right? To say the words, it has a certain meaning, of course. It does point, I think, in the right direction. But the test is that, the test is the actual staying with what the pain, whatever comes at us. Lucy, you want to say something? I know, Miles, you raised your hand, but Lucy was...
Go ahead, Lucy. Go ahead, Lucy.
Okay.
So what I learned, I think, is to reduce suffering is to learn not to continue to accumulate the illusory self as an identity. I think so that I can face... life is challenge, it's full of challenge. I think that's just a fact. So I can face challenge as what it is instead of change it into sorrow and suffering. I think there's a difference between face life and this. When we have this illusory self, actually inevitably we resist life as what it is. I think that's what I have learned from this teaching. And the other thing I think it was very interesting is a lot of times when we talk about no division, no center, no boundary, to me, it is more at conceptual, intellectual level. But I did have very interesting, which I shared with Javier 3 weeks ago in Encinitas Botanic Garden. And there was just totally unexpected. I was sitting in front of a very small waterfall. And I think I was a little bit tired. I just wanted to close my eyes. And then we're just very immediately, and I feel there's some new revelation that I was experiencing. At the beginning, I was a little bit disoriented. And later on, what I really appreciated is at that time, I completely, my mind, no thinking, my emotion, there's no emotional response. And then, my physical sensation was almost none. Like usually when we sit, we have a physical sensation. I'm sitting with a chair, my hand is right. I went back yesterday to the same spot. There was no realization. But at that particular moment, I literally feel I was just an open field with no center, no division, no boundary. So what I take that is, in our existence, not only we have somatic, we have cognitive, we have also existential being. And that experience itself just expand because most of us lives that somatic and cognitive, psychological dimension, right? And those dimension, to me, inevitably is centered, is self-centered. And this particular experience helped me to understand that, for me, not only I have the somatic psychological, I have another dimension of being. And to me, that being is an open field without division, without center, without boundary. And that experience itself helps me to expand my understanding of me as a form of life. Not only I have my body, I have my psychological, reaction, which intend to protect me as a separate individual. But beyond that, I also have an existential being. And that for me is just an open field without division, without sense, and without boundary. And then I really appreciate that experiences. And that helps me to learn to live in a more holistic. Not only I have physical, I have psychological, I also have existential. To me, that is no division, no center, no boundary. It's an open field, a more holistic life, and also more peaceful life. What I really feel, I know that Kay talked about freedom. Freedom to me is no center, no self-centered. When you have no self-centered, you are free. And love comes from freedom. Love means because you don't have a self-center, so you don't have a division, you don't have an inter-outer me versus you, me versus world. And I also like to add is peace. When we do not have division, when we do not have conflict, when we do not have violence internally, externally, and that brings us to this peaceful life. So I think that experience really helped me. I'm glad it happened when we are taking this class. This happened the first time, but I think that really helped me to understand the form of life more holistically. Because before this existential side, there's no division, just like Laura just mentioned, right? There's no center, no boundary. To me, it's intellectual understanding, conceptual understanding. But that experience helped me understand, why those teachers, Kay or Javier, teach in that kind of dimension. That really helped me to understand from a direct experiences, and it also helps me to reorganize my life in a more holistic and peaceful way, which is grounded into my own existential architecture, not follow like today's content, not follow tradition, not follow religion, not follow any political agenda, any organization's agenda, just yourself. And I think that kind of direct experience really helps.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that. I mean, that's what we're trying to talk about, actually, we're talking about, right? And as you say, the word is not the thing. And when you find the actuality, that makes all the difference. See, the word doesn't necessarily make any difference. What makes it is the actuality, right? The perception of it. See? So yes, all right, good. Well, hey, that's why you say, there's no authority, there's no teacher, and there's no student. There's just learning, right? So there's no distinction between us at all. See, that's because the discovery is the authentic thing. That's what we're talking about. An authenticity of being, which comes from perception. See? So that sort of, what we're going to say is the proof. Well, I'm not sure I want to prove anything. But just to encounter, to discover the beauty of discovery. Yeah.
So since this is our last class, I think I have a question, just it's a little bit more comprehensive. I just more or less mentioned about case inference on me. This book, to me, seems like my first book to read about case work. I mean, first, I really appreciate Ralph's effort to coordinate this class, and I really appreciate Javier's, sharing his insight. And I'm just curious about, Javier or everybody else, and appreciate that I have the opportunity to meet all of you guys. I sincerely hope that we can continue to maintain contact after this class as a way to support each other, to more sharing our appreciation for case teaching and our practice. And I think my curiosity is for each one of you. What do you think from your experiences? What is case inference on you? We don't necessarily have to talk about this today if other people have other questions, but I'm just hopefully we can talk about it after this class, continue to maintain contact. I'm just very curious about this.
Yeah, well, maybe you talk to Ralph maybe or something, if that can be.
Lucy emailed me about that a short time ago, and I think the question is if there's enough interest of among you to stay in contact with each other. I'd be happy to copy the email addresses in my next and last recording that I'm sending out to you. Instead of blind copying, it will be a copy so that you can each have each other's email address. I guess you cannot maybe, well, you might have to guess a little bit at whose email address responds to whom if the name isn't in it. But with many of you, it is. I think actually with almost all of you, it is. So that would be a way if you're open to that, if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. So for me, a K is somebody I feel deeply resonated with, even if this is my first class. I don't view him as my teacher because I think the similarity, more or less, like from existential structure perspective and the way he expressed himself, I view, even though he's no longer with us, but I really view he's somebody who worked together with me. And that's the same way I view Javier. I really appreciate Javier's teaching, even if he's our teacher. He's in Spain. I'm in California. I think we work all together in this past this road, and I really appreciate the opportunity we get a chance to meet each other in this class.
Good.
So, is there anyone who's who doesn't want to be included in the emails that I would send out to all of you in the next recording? With the next recording, is there anyone who doesn't want to be included? Then I wouldn't include it because I don't want to include somebody who doesn't want to be included. But otherwise, I'll just send out all the email addresses of those in this particular session. And is there are you interested in staying in touch with each other? That's, of course, the main question here that Lucy is suggesting that it might be of interest for some of you. Is there interest? Yes, can you nod? Those who are interested in?
Yes, I'm interested.
Okay, well, then I'll do that.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We're connected, I know.
Good.
Yeah, that's great.
Miles, you had a question, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I could get some thoughts on this. The Four Noble Truths, beginning with there is suffering. I think we're talking here mostly about psychological suffering, conditioned suffering. In a sense, to me, that feels conceptual. As we go through, the ending of suffering, of course, this impermanence is brought up in certain spiritual traditions. And that's a big one. Impermanence, permanence, we invoke the idea, the concept of time, which we've touched on here, which I think is very important. And I think you mentioned that Kay says that the me is time, which I really like. I like the conciseness of that, Javier. And so I would have to draw a straight line to suffering is delusional if I'm talking about psychological suffering, unnecessary suffering brought about by attachment, etc. All these things we brought into focus here. So, how do we reduce that? Lucy talked about something very nice, I think, which is peace, actually putting this into action. And when I started looking into this a little more closely about 5 years ago, my daughter, after about 7 months, and I had an experience similar, I guess, to maybe what Lucy described, a Kensho experience, as the Japanese would say, or seeing essence or seeing nature. And my daughter said, "Dad, you seem more peaceful." She was about 16 at the time. And I thought, that's enough for me. That's enough. it was wonderful to have that reflected back in that way to someone I love, to a family member. Now, one other thing I would point out is this whole aspect of suffering, if it is in fact, and people can offer their comments, if you feel suffering, psychological suffering is a delusion. I think we can go further in using the psychological self to escape something that we feel we're in. I think that's also a delusion. So the rub comes in when the conditioned psychological self tries to get out of something it's not in, or it tries to get into something it's not out of. In other words, there's a psychological self when being is ignored, when the thing that comes before my mind moves, the thing that requires no effort, no constructs, no beliefs, it's the thing that comes before. And so there's a knowing before the known. And that's absolutely clear when it's looked at directly. So there's this trap, I think, when we're looking for methods and various ways, we're trying to get out of something we're not in, i.e. suffering.
I'm not following you. I'm not following you very clearly.
So the you that I'm calling the you, the known, okay, is the thing that's trying to do the thing to see the knowing, the verbing part that is occurring before it's claimed by the noun. It's the mind assumes the body of which it is a part. It's that basic mistake. It's that first little thing that's kind of shoehorned in there. That's the quickest thing in time that I've discovered. It just happens. It becomes the starting point.
Okay, let me see. Let me see if I can understand.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Just to try to understand.
Thank you.
Now, you could say perception is quicker than thought. Are you saying that? Wait, see what you call it before the known comes into the picture.
The perception thing is also an interesting one to me because there's something that's going to ask, is it reliable, or what is perceiving? There's something that's going to be inserted there. If we're talking about it right away, there's something being inserted there.
No. Perception is quicker than thought. Because for thought to come in, there has to be already a perception. But what happens is that thought then obscures the perception and becomes the perceiver.
Correct. Okay, let's go with that. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the structures you're kind of bringing about. Yeah. Oh, Nora has to go. All right. Okay, Nora, ciao. Right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go with that. I mean, blue is blue, green is green before it's named. Let's say.
This is part. I mean, that's a very interesting perspective, I think, in terms of what we are talking about, of perception. Krishnamurti called intelligence, perception, and action without the time interval. So without intervention of the known, he's trying. As you can see, he's trying to take the known out every time. That's the freedom from the known is the essential freedom. But that freedom comes when we perceive its, its danger in interfering with the connection between perception and action. It introduces a factor of distortion because it refers to another time, is anachronistic. It throws us back to a time which does not belong now. Therefore, fragments the now, comes in between. I was hearing you saying this but maybe I'm reading from my own background again. You see, maybe my past is coming into the picture.
Let me just restate the assumption that I think is made by the psychological mind. It's making the assumption that we are in something, i.e., I am in suffering. I am experiencing suffering. And now I'm going to use the psychological condition self, the thing that I'm calling a Miles, an action figure, to get out of something that I think I'm in. I think the direct perception is I'm not in.
The direct perception. But what's the fact of our life? Because we can also make assumptions.
Well, I'm not using the psychological self now. I'm going to the direct perception, which gets right down to it's delusionary. It's not the thing. It's not the beingness that has any suffering. It's not the thing that's occurring before. It's the thing that, and that's the assumption that my constricted self is making. That is an incorrect turn in a big way. I feel, at least when I suffer, it's a delusion.
If I might clarify, Miles, it sounds like you're talking about an imagined fear.
I'm talking about all kinds of psychological suffering. I mean, it could just be anxiousness, you know.
Right, but,
Yeah,
but that all gets down to fear.
Well, it's referring to this thing about time. The self is time. And therefore it's the past. And when it intervenes, it's delusional. It's essentially delusional. Are you saying something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you are. I mean, in a way, it would make logical sense, no? That the self as a source of sorrow, suffering, fear. Fear is part of the suffering. It's essentially produced by thought. It's produced by the past. If we can see that, of course, you see, when it's actually happening, you see, the power of delusions is strong. Delusions become reality. Thought creates its own reality. The self is dominating our human psychology as things are, collectively and individually. So to say that it is delusional makes sense in terms of how we are looking at it. But as you're also pointing out, it has to be perceived. It has to be seen through. Otherwise, it's just an idea again. We just put another label on the system that it is delusional. That will not be sufficient. It's pointing in the right direction, but we need that perception, right? That's what you're saying. When there is the perception, then you realize that this in-between state of the self as the past is in fact delusional, right? So that is a very important perception, but it has to be a perception. Then you have these sort of states of non-duality, if you want to call it, of wholeness, of perceiving without a perceiver, and therefore you have the peace that you're talking about. But that requires, that's why he says this requires attention to the movement of the past, right? To understand that whole movement, how it interferes, to see it in action. Because the problem is, of course, as a friend of mine says, well, the past, once it becomes the perceiver, it can no longer perceive itself. Right? Because it's perceiving everything else. See, it's like, where are my glasses? You're looking for your glasses when you have them on, right? Yeah. You will never find them, you see. So the self is like this. It says, I perceive. It does not perceive that it is perceiving its own past, whatever it recognizes. That's the delusional aspect that is involved in the self. To see through that is to collapse the self, and therefore to see the delusional aspect, and therefore to have no division any longer between perception, action, and what you call being, which I think is quite right. That will be being, see? Time denies being. The self, therefore, that's why the self is condemned to become, because inherent in his own nature is the denial of being. It's a very interesting thing to look at that we are denying, the self is in denying being, because it introduces time, and therefore there will always be something missing in our life. So it has to become to try and make up for it. But the becoming is another projection of that same fragment.
That's exactly right. And when it's looked at directly, the interesting thing is there's no edge to it. There's no edge to being and becoming. You cannot find that edge. Not
Cannot find the edge.
ethical mind. You will not.
Interesting observation. How do you mean? How do you mean? You cannot find the distinction. What separates the two? They merge into each other.
There's no edge, because it's just to have an edge, you have to have it in time. The being and becoming. That's a substrate of time itself.
You're subtle, Miles. Very
Well,
good.
it's not something you can even try and make a concept of. You just got to look for yourself.
Yes. This is maybe why Krishnamurti says there are no opposites in the psychological field, because it's either one is an exclusiveness of being. There may be no edge in that there's no coexistence. Separateness in coexistence. You can't put love and hate next to each other. Either one is or is the other. Maybe that's part of the meaning of what is implied in your comment. There's no edge between becoming and being. Either one is or the other. It's like he says, love, when you are not, love is. When you are, love is not.
Maybe that's what the Christian, when they say God is or he isn't, maybe that's what they're pointing to.
They're literally mutually exclusive.
Exclusive, yeah. This is kind of, we enter into exclusive world.